This could be one of the most consequential decisions for European security in decades. Donald Trump has announced the withdrawal of at least 5,000 American troops currently stationed in Germany. On top of that, planned missile deliveries to Europe are also being called into question. So is Trump abandoning Europe entirely? And how are France and other European nations responding? If you've been following the news lately, you know that the relationship between the United States and European countries has been anything but warm. There was Trump's threat to annex Greenland, a territory belonging to Denmark. Before that came the trade war, then the contradictory messaging on Ukraine, then a string of statements that seemed clearly aimed at pressuring European governments. A lot has happened over the past year. What's worth noting, though, is that despite all of these provocations, most European countries, with the notable exception of Spain, which took a firm public stand against Trump, particularly over his approach to the war in the Middle East, chose a strategy of maintaining stable relations with Washington. The logic seemed to be, Trump is unpredictable, and even if he threatens our interests, it's better to keep him on our side. That approach has been debated heavily, but it was the position most European governments visibly adopted. Recently, however, that posture has been crumbling. The ongoing conflict in the Middle East served as yet another reminder that the Trump administration was making major decisions without consulting its traditional allies, and certainly without consulting Europeans. As a result, Spain took the lead in distancing itself, and France followed to some extent, at least in its public statements. Now Germany has joined them. Chancellor Friedrich Merz made headlines last week when, commenting on the war involving Iran, he said the Americans, and this is a direct quote, have clearly no strategy, and that an entire nation is being humiliated, referring to the United States itself. Trump fired back, calling the German Chancellor totally incompetent and telling him to focus on fixing his own country's problems. But this isn't just a war of words. Trump also threatened to raise tariffs on cars produced within the European Union from 15% to 25%, a move that would hit Germany especially hard, given how central its auto industry is to its economy. And as mentioned, he announced the withdrawal of 5,000 American soldiers from Germany within the next 6 to 12 months. To be clear, talk of American disengagement from Europe isn't new. Trump has floated the idea before. But this time he appears to be following through. Right now, somewhere between 36,000 and 40,000 American troops are stationed in Germany. That presence dates back to the end of the Second World War and the Cold War era. It serves as a strategic hub for the United States and as a form of collective deterrence for Europe. The idea being that a strong American military presence discourages adversaries from taking aggressive action against European nations. For the U.S., it also provides a valuable staging ground for operations in the Middle East. That presence has always sparked debate about sovereignty and dependency, with voices on various sides of the political spectrum arguing that Europe relies too heavily on Washington. Since Trump returned to power, those debates have intensified dramatically. When people talk about protection and defense in this context, the question that always comes up is, protection from whom? The threat from Russia is frequently cited, especially in the wake of the invasion of Ukraine, but the broader conversation goes well beyond Russia. On the practical side, defense analysts say that American forces could likely continue their core missions in the region, even after a partial withdrawal. The real risk is if the U.S. pulls out highly specialized units, or if this initial withdrawal turns out to be just the beginning of something much larger. Trump has already signaled that additional troops could be affected, not only in Germany, but also in Spain and Italy. In total, the United States currently deploys around 86,000 military personnel across Europe. And beyond the troops, there's the missile question. The U.S. has announced it will not, at least for now, send the long-range missiles to Germany that had been planned. Those missiles were scheduled to begin deployment in Germany this year. Crucially, that decision had been made under the previous administration, under Joe Biden, not under Trump. These are not ordinary weapons. They would have given European forces the ability to strike deep into enemy territory from a distance. Currently, no European country possesses that kind of capability. Even France and the United Kingdom, which have nuclear weapons and some limited long-range missiles, could not fully compensate for what the U.S. had been offering in this context. If the U.S. follows through on blocking these missiles and continues withdrawing troops, Many analysts believe Europe stands to lose a significant part of its deterrence capability against potential adversaries. And then there is NATO, the political and military alliance of Western nations, largely led by the United States, that many European countries belong to. Trump has never hidden his skepticism toward NATO. His consistent argument, repeated for years, is that European countries don't invest enough in their own defense and are too dependent on America. In recent years, especially since the war in Ukraine, Europe has been rearming, but from a position of significant delay. On the specific question of long-range missiles, analysts estimate Europe could realistically develop its own capability by around 2030 at the earliest. Meanwhile, European defense spending is expected to nearly double by that same year, as countries work toward greater strategic independence. One final point worth making: this shift isn't only alarming Europeans. Some American officials and analysts are raising concerns too, warning that a major U.S. withdrawal from Europe could ultimately weaken America's own position on the continent and signal to Europeans once and for all that the United States is no longer a reliable partner, pushing Europe to seek other alliances and accelerate building its own defense capabilities independently.